Have you ever smiled while something inside you quietly shattered? Maybe you laughed at their joke, even though it sliced you. Maybe you nodded and said, "I understand," while your heart whispered, "Why does this always hurt?" This is the story of how you survived by pretending not to feel. They didn't hit you. They didn't scream. But they erased you piece by piece with silence, sarcasm, and 1,000 small jabs that never left a bruise. You told yourself it was love because it came wrapped in warmth sometimes. And on the days it didn't, you blamed yourself for expecting more. You began shrinking, not all at once, inch by inch, like water evaporating under heat. You stopped asking questions. You avoided eye contact. You held back your opinions. You laughed less. You cried in secret. You told yourself you were just being strong, being mature, being loyal. But you weren't. You were disappearing. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You called it love, but it was control. You called it peace, but it was silence born of fear. You called it truth, but it was contempt wearing a mask of honesty. You kept smiling, because if you stopped, you'd have to face the truth. That you were hurting in a place no one could see. That you were alone, even in someone else's arms. And the most painful truth of all, you allowed it. Not because you were weak, but because you were trained by society, by family, by patterns to call dysfunction normal and sacrifice yourself in the name of connection. So you stayed, you adapted, you bent, you broke, and yet here you are, reading this, feeling something stir. The recognition of pain not yet fully named, the flicker of awareness that maybe, just maybe, what you called love wasn't love at all. This isn't about blame. This is about awakening. Because the moment you question the story, the healing begins. And the smile that once broke you, it might just be the first crack in the shell you no longer need to wear. It starts small. You overlook the comment that made your chest tighten. You dismiss the moment they ignored your voice. You rationalize the way they twisted your words until even you couldn't remember what you meant. You look away, not because you don't see it, but because facing it feels unbearable. But every time you look away, a piece of you vanishes. You begin to question yourself. Did that really happen? Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I am too sensitive. You internalize their doubts until they become your own. This is not love. This is erosion. Carl Jung believed the soul becomes ill when its truth is denied. And make no mistake, your soul has been whispering to you all along in the sleepless nights, the sudden tears, the tension that never fully leaves your shoulders, the tightness in your chest when their name lights up your phone. You've been ignoring your own compass, and it's costing you everything. There are names for what you've endured. Gaslighting, which turns your reality into fog. Emotional manipulation, dressed as just caring. Control, masked as protection. Contempt, sugar-coated as honesty. Affection withdrawal, used as punishment. Empty apologies, repeated like rituals with no intention behind them. Each behavior chips away at your identity until you start living in reaction to someone else's moods, words, and silence. You become a ghost in your own life, still present, but no longer whole. And here's the hardest truth. None of it changes until you do. You can't fix what you won't name. You can't heal what you keep justifying. You're not broken for staying. You stayed because you believed love meant sacrifice. You stayed because no one ever taught you that love doesn't demand your silence, but now you know, or at least you suspect. And that suspicion, it's your soul rising. This chapter of your life isn't about condemning anyone else. It's about reclaiming your story, starting with the parts you were taught to look away from. Because every time you say it's fine when it's not, you're paying with your peace. And peace is far too expensive to keep trading away. It never looks like a thunderstorm. Awakening is quiet. It comes in the middle of the night when you find yourself staring at the ceiling, wondering how you became someone who tiptoes through their own life. It's in the way you flinch when someone raises their voice, even if they're not yelling at you. It's in the sigh you didn't realize you held every time you hear their footsteps. Then one day, it happens. Maybe it's a sentence in a book, a line in a movie, a stranger's story that mirrors yours a little too well. Or maybe it's the way your child looks at you, with confusion, maybe fear, and you realize they're watching you accept what you swore they never would. That's the moment you can't unsee. You whisper, "This isn't who I am," and your soul replies, "No, but it's who you've been pretending to be." Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And now you're looking inward. Finally, you begin to notice the patterns, how the same hurt wears different faces. You trace them back to your childhood, to the relationships you thought were love, to the voices that taught you being good meant being quiet. It's not rage you feel, it's grief. Grief for the parts of you that were silenced, grief for the moments you didn't speak up, grief for the years spent playing small so someone else could feel big. But underneath the grief, something else pulses: truth. You're not crazy. You're not dramatic. You're not hard to love. You are surviving. But now you want more than survival. You want wholeness. You want joy that isn't borrowed, laughter that isn't followed by apologies, peace that doesn't depend on someone else's mood. You no longer want to be chosen by someone who only values you when you're silent. You want to choose yourself. The awakening isn't loud, but it is powerful. It doesn't demand action right away. It just demands honesty. Because once you say, "This is not okay," you start to remember what is. And in that remembering, you begin to return to your voice, your body, your story, to yourself. You don't announce it. There's no dramatic speech, no grand goodbye, just a quiet decision somewhere deep in your chest that says, "No more." You stop explaining. You stop fixing. You stop bending until you break. At first, it feels strange, like wearing shoes that fit after years of walking in pain. Your steps are uncertain, awkward, but free. You might not leave the relationship right away. You might still wake up next to the same person. But something inside you has shifted. You no longer absorb their silence like punishment. You no longer chase their approval like air. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And so you begin. Not with revenge, not with rage, but with return. You return to your journal, writing truths you were afraid to speak aloud. You return to your breath, noticing how often you've been holding it. You return to your reflection, noticing the sadness in your eyes and also the flicker of something else, something alive. You build boundaries, not to push people away, but to bring yourself closer. You spend time alone, and for the first time, it doesn't feel lonely. It feels sacred. You cry, often, not from despair, but from release. You're not breaking down. You're washing off the lies, the guilt, the shame that was never yours to carry. At times, you'll question yourself. You'll hear the echo of their voice. You're selfish. You changed. But that voice is no longer your compass. You're finding a new one. You surround yourself with softness, with friends who don't demand that you shrink, with voices that say you're allowed to take up space, with music that feels like truth. And slowly, the version of you that's been waiting beneath the fear, beneath the people-pleasing, starts to rise. She's raw. He's honest. They're messy, but they are real. And they are ready. Because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about unbecoming everything you were told you had to be loved. You are not rebuilding from scratch. You're returning home. You wake up, and for the first time in years, your chest isn't tight. There's still healing to do, yes. But now, the weight is different. It's no longer the heaviness of pretending. It's the lightness of truth. You're no longer chasing closure from those who never gave you clarity. You stopped searching for softness in the places that only gave you splinters. You've learned to offer that softness to yourself. You speak up, not to prove anything, but because your voice matters. You rest, not out of exhaustion, but because you've earned peace. You no longer explain your no, you honor it. Carl Jung said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. You've done it. You've walked through the shadows and named what lived there. You've looked at the parts of you that flinched, that feared, that begged for love, and you've held them, not judged them. You stopped calling survival strength. You stopped calling dysfunction love. And in its place, you've planted something new, not perfection, but presence. You're present with your joy instead of fearing it will be taken. You're present with your sadness instead of stuffing it down. You're present with your boundaries, your needs, your desires, without shame. And something wild happens. You begin to attract what mirrors this new truth. Friendships with depth, conversations with kindness, love that doesn't require you to vanish. You no longer walk on eggshells. You walk on solid ground, your own. And when you look at the mirror now, you don't see someone broken. You see someone reborn, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally know you are enough, even in the becoming. Your story is no longer about the pain. It's about the power that rose from it. And if someone asks, what changed? You'll smile, not the forced kind, but the kind that lives in your eyes, and say, I remembered who I was before the world told me to forget. This isn't the end. It's the beginning. And this time it's yours.